The scariest story I've ever heard was about a man named Harrison Okene. Miles off the coast of Nigeria and deep within the grasp of the Atlantic Ocean, Harrison found himself aboard the Jaskin 4, a relatively unassuming tugboat that was instructed to help stabilize an oil tanker at the nearby Chevron platform. But during this routine operation, a rogue ocean swell rocked this small boat just as Harrison had made his way into the bathroom. In an instant, the entire ship and crew were turned completely upside down, as waves slammed ferociously into the bow, sending the Jaskin 4 into a violent spin downwards. The lights cut out and he was left alone, with ice-cold water filling the room up to his chest. Now trapped at the bottom of the ocean, the ship had stopped moving, and Harrison found himself with a small air pocket that allowed him to breathe, unable to see even inches in front of him, as he slowly began to starve while his body became numb to the unbelievable harshness of the cold. For 3 days, he sat alone in that room, unable to do anything but think about the sounds around him, the feelings or lack thereof in his body, the creaks and groans of the sheet metal on board being torn apart, or the movements of large creatures outside that stalked around the boat, as if they knew prey was inside. And when rescuers finally found him against that wall, alone and afraid, at the bottom of the ocean, somehow miraculously still alive 3 days later, they asked him a simple question. What did you see? What did you hear in the void? Fear is a funny thing, and that's because fear is at the heart of both some of the worst, but also some of the greatest aspects of our humanity. In the tragic story of Harrison Okene, we got to see not only the horrors of the ocean, but also one man's unwavering will to live. But for Harrison, the scariest part about being trapped at the bottom of the sea wasn't the pain or fear of dying, it was the fear of everything around him. The things he couldn't see, the sounds that made no sense, and the tragic ideas that spawned in his head about what might happen rather than what actually did. Imagine sitting alone in that dark room for days, confined with nothing to occupy your mind but the stillness and silence of certain death. It's fascinating for the same reason that so many people find shows or movies about serial killers interesting. The idea or wonder of things so foreign, so unknown. Of things that seem so impossible to understand or wrap our heads around. Humanity pushed to the brink. Because as scary as that gap in what we expect and what something actually is, it's that same gap, the fear of the unknown, that makes stories like that of Harrison Okene so tantalizing to think about. And it's for that very reason that much of the popular media throughout human history leans into these ideas heavily. They sit at the core of what makes us feel alive, whether that be Moby Dick and giant sea creatures that can kill us, or the original story, the Epic of Gilgamesh with its grand journey to find immortality. Almost all great stories at their core are a play on the idea of discovering the unknown and overcoming the fear that comes along with it. And in many ways, it might just be the key ingredient that fuels the hero's journey, or in other words, the fire that lights a spark in our souls. You know, when I was a kid, most of my favorite games were things I could play with friends, like Halo, Call of Duty, or StarCraft. But there was another type of title that I was getting into at the time that would capture my imagination in an even more powerful way, RPGs. And two specific games in that genre left a profound effect on me, not only because they are what made me fall in love with games, but because of the wonder that they inspired in me. And one of these was the original Mass Effect. In the game, you take the reins of Commander Shepard, a human specter who has found himself on the Citadel, a massive space station full of aliens, megastructures, and bizarre technologies. And in no time, it becomes clear that the real threat of this game is actually an ancient race of highly advanced machines called the Reapers, that every 50,000 years once again awaken and purge the galaxy of all intelligent life, in a bid to stop natural organisms from becoming too advanced and destroying themselves. And all throughout the first game, you only get glimpses of these machine creatures, these massive ship-shaped things that dwarf continents and look like Leviathan monsters from the sea. For so long, we are told about their power, their intelligence, their omnipotence, but only get to fight and engage with those they control, rather than an actual Reaper itself. That is, until the infamous Vermeer mission, because it's on this mission right towards the end of the first Mass Effect game that we finally get to come face to face with one of these so-called gods. In a small and dark room, illuminated by the red glow of a hologram of a Reaper before us, Commander Shepard gets to, for the first time, talk with these Cthulian monstrosities, and in that moment we're treated to this.
There is a realm of existence so far beyond your own, you cannot even imagine it. I am beyond your comprehension. I am sovereign.
This is not only the most powerful scene in Mass Effect, but one of the most powerful moments in a game, period. And that's because this speech was Sovereign, the first Reaper we ever meet, and one of many we will encounter by the end of the series, perfectly encapsulates the fear of the unknown. Beings that are so beyond our understanding or contemplation that they regard us as little more than ants. Creatures who know and understand things we would never even have imagined, or adversaries that are so beyond our strength there is no hope in defeating them. This one part of Mass Effect is so memorable not because of the menacing and commanding voice of Sovereign or interesting set dressing, it's because it makes us think about what could be out there, what intelligences might lurk in the shadows of the universe, or why these Reapers are killing over and over again. What is their goal? Where are they from? Do they feel? Do they love? Do they hate? The Reapers of Mass Effect, at least in the first game, are almost entirely an enigma, and that's what makes them so great as villains, something that we cannot fully understand no matter how hard we try, forces of nature that defy our very understanding of the universe. It's cosmic horror and fear of the unknown at its best, taking us on a journey not just through a perilous struggle in the universe, but a struggle within our own minds. In fact, this scene was so captivating it single-handedly launched me into a lifelong love of games, in constant search for that same feeling of fear again. After all, isn't that what fear of the unknown really is? Interfacing with a monster which we could never understand, sitting alone at the bottom of the ocean, cold and afraid. These experiences are not only influential for their brutality, but also for the way they pique our intrigue and force us to fully focus on the wonder of it all. Fear of the unknown isn't just about being afraid. It's about being inspired too, inspired to learn more and understand things that were never meant to be understood, like Sovereign, a hyper-advanced and intelligent consciousness with shadowy intentions. And that's what makes this special type of fear so interesting, and why it lies at the heart of any human experience. We all, whether we like to admit it or not, gravitate towards the unknown, things which we either cannot or should not have, the forbidden fruit Adam and Eve. Whereas the fear of heat, of cold, violence, rejection, or of the night all constrain us to hide and lock ourselves away in safety, the fear of the unknown, by contrast, does the exact opposite, spiking our curiosity and roaring us from our slumber. You know, there's a famous phenomenon in psychology known as the call of the void. It makes the unintuitive observation that we as human beings are often drawn to doing dangerous or potentially fatal things in the spur of the moment. Like when we are driving and test ourselves to see how long we can keep our eyes closed shut, or imagine what it would be like to swerve into oncoming traffic. Or what about the strange feelings you get standing on the edge of a cliff, where you can sometimes sense a weird voice in your head with an invisible hand guiding you closer to the edge, begging you to jump. Because deep within all of us is that fear of the unknown, which, like the forbidden fruit that Eve ate that doomed humanity, or the fabled chalice of immortality kings have searched for throughout history, are all so fascinating and wondrous that if even only for a moment we are willing to risk everything to know the truth. Reaching for powers or answers in the void of the unexplained, a fear that beckons us in rather than shutting us out, a force of potential catastrophe that somehow molds itself into human growth and expansion. When I look up into the night sky, I always seem to daydream. I wonder about what is out there, whether that be aliens, new forms of physics, or most interestingly, things I've never even thought to think of. And at the cornerstone of all of that seems to be a sense of cosmic horror and astonishment that makes space or places like the deep ocean so alluring. And that's why when you play a game like Subnautica, nothing will ever beat that first playthrough, the one where you have no idea what to expect next. As you make your way from beautiful coral reefs and shallow waters all the way to pitch black nightmares thousands of meters underwater. And this is all with a guiding light that isn't dictated by a fun main story or getting to meet ancient aliens. No, the real interesting part about Subnautica is the scenarios we get to make up in our heads as we move on from one location to the next. Like when you first hear the sounds of a leviathan off in the distance, where the echoes of its howls pierce your soul and send shivers down your spine. And yet, despite how terrifying moments like that can be, they are exactly what make the game so special, tapping into our innate desires for the unknown through the conduit of fear. Because despite how terrifying and dangerous going deeper into the ocean in Subnautica can be, we are always rewarded with something special for our efforts. Whether that be the blood kelp zone with its deep colors, the ancient river and its long-lost secrets, or the inactive lava zone with its flurry of red. Even listening to this probably gets you excited to play the game, not because the story is cool or the mechanics are solid and the graphics are nice, but because just the thought of getting to find and explore something new in a place so foreign to ours makes any soul sing. And it's also due to this exact part of the human condition that my most anticipated upcoming game in a long time isn't even one we've seen gameplay for yet. Exodus. Because while seemingly there is a bigger reveal for gameplay for this title coming soon as of the time of writing this, what really gets me excited about Exodus is the potential. After reading the accompanying novel for the game and hearing about the lore of Ark ships that leave Earth only to find a new galaxy of hyper-advanced humans called Celestials 40,000 years into the future, my excitement for the game comes not from what the game might even be, but rather just the stories it could tell. And it's a perfect example of the fact that sometimes the idea of a game is even better than the game itself, a principle that carries over just as much to movies, books, television, and even real things in life that we anticipate. Or in other words, the expectation of something tends to rally a stronger emotion within us than the actual something itself. The anticipation of a raise, the anticipation of that first kiss, or getting married to the person you love, or accomplishing the goals you always set out for. Something about that journey is so much more satisfying than actually getting it. And I think that's because there is a fear in all of us, an expectation of what is to come that is so much more exciting when it is not an assured thing, but instead an extraneous thought in our heads that only may come true. That element of fear that is tacked onto anything which is not yet fully understood or fully achieved. Think back to your favorite worlds or places in fiction. They probably were shrouded in as much mystery as they were explained forthright, and that mystery is what made them special. The answers to the biggest questions either being left untold or only leading to more intrigue. A great example of this would be the elves from Dragon Age Origin, with questions of whether or not the stories of the Chantry, the biggest religion in that universe, even holds any truth or is all a lie. Because in the future games of the Dragon Age series past Origins, we began to get more and more answers to these questions that came up in the first game. And in a way, while we all wanted the answers to these questions, almost counterintuitively, the series became less and less interesting as it went on because so much of the fear of the unknown from the original game was taken away. The best lore reveals in any Dragon Age game, any Mass Effect title, or any media or even human journey at all for that matter, comes when we get more questions than answers. I can even speak personally to this YouTube channel. Some of the most exciting moments were not when I got millions of views on topics I loved and spent so much time creating videos on, or even tons of nice or mean comments to bolster my dopamine when I go back and read over things I've already made. Weirdly, some of the greatest moments on this channel are when I try something new, when I fail, or when my back is against the wall with constant fear that I may once again become a failure and will have to dig myself up from the ashes. It's the whole reason I make videos like this that are so different from my usual affair. It's a call to feel something you've not yet done. Because as scary as moments like this are, they make you feel alive. They make you contemplate about things you could do, could change, could learn. Fear of the uncertainty of the future, of the unknown, is frightening, but also so empowering as well. Because in a way, it breaks those shackles that confine us to normality, to easy, and instead thrust us into the jaws of hardship of the hero's journey. As much as we as people find comfort in a sense of safety, it's only by facing our demons, or the biggest challenges before us, that we grow and become proud of the people we are. I mentioned earlier how there were 2 role-playing titles I played as a kid that made me fall in love with video games, and how one of those was Mass Effect. The other, though, was The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. In the game, you find yourself wrapped up in a conspiracy involving the murder of the Emperor himself, where you must fight evil at every step to defeat Daedric gods threatening the realm. And along this journey, in order to save the day, you must travel into lots of so-called Oblivion gates, portals into the hellish Daedric realms themselves, full of screaming banshees, giant spiders, and scenes of torture. And as a child, I was utterly terrified of these things. So much so that for the first 40 hours I played this game, I refused to even get close to any of them. The sounds they made, the monsters that surrounded them, and the higher difficulty in combat all made me beyond apprehensive. But more than anything, I didn't want to go through these portals because I was scared of what might be on the other side. At the time, online videos and reviews or guides weren't as popular, and because I was so young, everything I did in-game was something I had to discover for myself, which meant that the prospect of going into an Oblivion gate was one of the most terrifying ideas to little me at the time. And that's because I had no idea what would be waiting for me on the other side, or even what I was supposed to do once I was in this new area. To me, they were nothing more than a horror movie waiting to happen, and thus I avoided them at all costs. But as time went on, and I learned more and more about the world from playing, I couldn't shake the feelings inside of me, that wonder of what might really lie beyond those gates. Suddenly, every time I would see one, instead of running away, I would simply look at it from afar, transfixed by the red glow that illuminated the grass and woodlands around it. And with the passing of days, this eventually grew into small skirmishes with the monsters outside, until eventually, I made the jump, and thrust my player character into a world of which was entirely foreign to me, still afraid beyond belief, clutching my controller tightly in my hands while a loading screen began to fill my vision. And yet, despite how frightened I was by this experience, despite how long it took me to man up and stop being the little wimp I was in elementary school, there was a voice inside my head that constantly asked a simple question. What's out there? No matter how afraid I felt or how far I tried to run away, my own mind would beckon me back to the danger at these Oblivion gates. Not because I wanted to get hurt, but because I went to bed every single night wondering what was on the other side. That fear of the unknown, of monsters I would find or the loot I would unlock, was such a powerful driving force that it counteracted my body's natural instincts to turn away. And that's what makes the fear of the unknown so utterly powerful. A force that can stir us from the deepest of slumbers or guide our hands through the most horrifying of moments, like traveling through an Oblivion gate as a wimpy little kid. No matter how hard we try, we can never truly escape our fears, because fear is at the heart of the human condition, of living any life. The fear of failure, the fear of pain, of cold, fire, heights, darkness, or silence, each with their own peculiarities and eccentricities that make them special, usually in service to our own safety or well-being. But there is a kind of fear that serves a more special purpose, one I find so much more fascinating than all the others, one that inspires us rather than holding us back: the unknown. In the books we read, in the games we play, the stories we tell, or the lives we live, there is always a child within us that looks towards the sky or beneath the oceans, filled with terror, but also excitement. The fear of the unknown is one of the most powerful forces in the universe because its call is never-ending, forcing all of us to explore the edges of math, science, language, the universe, and of our own minds. Despite how scary new things can be, it's these same things that are what make us great as people. Our capacity to conquer our fear of the unknown, to reach new and greater heights never thought possible. Bravery is not the absence of fear, but the action in the face of it. And for bravery to take place, there must be a fear from which it comes, a fear of the unknown. And it shows us that more than anything, fear is not always a bad thing. Sometimes, like in the case of the unknown, it can become one of the greatest forces for good in our lives that can inspire the greatest and most prosperous parts of all of us. After all, if something wasn't hard and didn't require a sense of overcoming and overbearing struggle, then was it even worth fighting for in the first place? All great things in life require sacrifice, and one of the greatest of these sacrifices we can all make is stepping into that void, into the uncertain future of unknown possibilities, of venturing into the places that scare us most, or doing things that might prove disastrous. Because only by taking this leap of faith, by having the bravery to face things head on with action, can we as humanity move onwards. The fear of the unknown isn't a constraint, it's a stimulant. So next time you're afraid of something, of asking that person you like out, of taking a risk making the things you love or leaving the job you hate, or saying how you truly feel in the face of people who may disagree, know that it's the fear of the unknown and your capacity to stand up against it which will dictate how you are measured against others within the echoes of eternity. And as always, thanks for watching.